Hello, welcome back to Loutzen Academy. In last week's video, we went over value scales and how to use a printed value scale to create an underpainting called Grisaille. And it's typically a black and white underpainting used by old masters during the Renaissance as a base painting so they can create these glazes to build on top of it. So in this week's video, we are going to demonstrate how to glaze on top of a black and white underpainting. Glazing techniques are beneficial, especially during the Old Masters Renaissance era, because a lot of these paints were very expensive, especially vibrant colors like lapis lazuli. And with a glazing technique, you thin out the paint itself with these glazes and spread the paint a lot further. These paintings would take months to years to create during that time period because of the materials used back then, linseed oil and the original oil paints. They would take a very long time to dry. Some Renaissance masters like to do a dry on dry technique where they allow the glazes to dry every single layer so they can build up the image. And other masters would like to use a wet on wet technique where the base layer is semi-wet and they put a wet glaze on top of it, and as they're glazing above it, it mixes the colors. These oil paintings do take a long time. The old masters spent time with their paintings that we don't see today. Luckily, we do have glazing materials now to speed up the process. I do have a linseed oil. It's faster drying and the older materials used by the old masters. So these old masters includes Van Eyck, the master of masters when it comes to this Grisaille underpainting and building with glazes above it. Then in the later Renaissance, we see Da Vinci and Titan also using this process as well. Later on, we do see materials change chemically, and since oils are less expensive at that time period, we do see people transitioning from glazing up the paintings into thicker use of brush strokes and to start seeing artists be more expressive with their paintings. And this is where we go into the Impressionist era, where we do see thicker paints and brush strokes. Before we get into the materials, what I'm drinking today is a double shot of espresso with some rum chata. I don't advise or condone doing this because it makes your liver work overtime. But I did have some leftover rum chata from the holidays, and I figured to mix it up a bit and use it as a creamer. Obviously, if you're under 21, I do not condone this activity at all. But if you want to make your liver work overtime, just mixing a bit of rum chata with some coffee is a very good way to do that. Over the weekend, we decided to go to our local art store. And by locally, I mean about an hour or so away from our current location. But this is a sweet art store. It has multiple materials I'll be going over to use for the glazing process. So we do have some turpentine. Turpentine is a solvent and it is used as a paint thinner. It has a faster drying time, which is beneficial. Since it's a paint thinner, it allows the paint to be more fluid and it spreads the paint. The thing with the turpentine, you may lose the quality of the paint and it does yellow over time. Additionally, we do have some linseed oil. It was used by the Renaissance artists back then, and this was a slower drying material, durable than the turpentine, and it's best for glazing, and you could use a lot less of the medium itself, and it brings out a glossy finish. And then we do have the mineral spritz. It's a paint thinner and without the strong odor and fumes. So I grabbed the linseed oil, and this specific linseed oil is faster drying than the refined linseed oil used by the old masters. So this is a great, instead of spending months for the glazings to dry out, it's just going to take a couple of days to a week or even shorter. Additionally, all of these materials are flammable and combustible, so there are certain ways to make sure that doesn't happen. If you have rags with linseed oil, do not put them in a pile crumbled up. The heat will get trapped and it will combust. And then I do suggest to research how to properly dispose any rags and paper towels with the linseed oil. This art store does have a lot of paint colors, and the pastels are very tempting to buy. But since we only buy what we need, I only got the linseed oil, my ivory black that I was running out of last week, and two paintbrushes, one thinner refined paintbrush for detail work and another brush for blending. So this store does also have a lot of different types of blacks too. So I thought that was a really cool thing. And then we decided to make this into a little coffee date since we did drive out of our way to get some art materials. And so we just wanted to just spend some time and enjoy where we were at. Additionally, we do have the dogs acting crazy underneath our deck right now. With my palette today, I used an alizarin crimson, a phthalo green, a burnt umber, a burnt sienna, a raw sienna, a cadmium red hue, and a cadmium yellow light, as well as a titanium white. So right now, we are currently trying to block in those shades in with using the linseed oil with the oil paint to create a glaze. And you can already see how the underpainting is already popping out through the color. And this is why the old masters do use a lot of time and effort into their underpainting as if it's a finished painting itself, because the glazes are meant to enhance the painting, not be the painting itself. I'm also using a piece of glass to test out my glazes. So I would just put the glaze on the glass and put it over the painting itself so you can kind of test to see how the glaze will interact with the underpainting. This is great if you have a color on the canvas that you don't really like and it's already dried so you can't wipe it away with the paint thinner. You can use the glaze as a way to see how the color corrects what you're trying to fix on the painting itself. The first colors I do start with was the darkest areas, was using that burnt umber, and I did mix the phthalo green and alizarin crimson to make that beautiful black that I like to make with those two colors, and I mixed that with the burnt umber to lightly glaze over the darker areas. Then going into the lighter areas, we did use the raw sienna, and it has this nice yellow tint to it that you do see German Shepherds. Between those two colors, I did use a little bit of that cadmium red to mix with the burnt sienna and umber, just so that we can get a little bit of red into that coat. Typically, German Shepherds, I do notice that they do have some red in their coat, so I just wanted to make sure I added that as well. I'm also using my fingers to blend out any areas I didn't like, and I'm also using a rag to wipe off any excess paints that I didn't like where I placed it. That's a great thing about having it underpainting dried already, is that if you do not like the glazes or colors that you place down, you can always just wipe it away. And typically, as we go into the lighter values, you might see them become more opaque. And these opaque colors will pop out more than the glazes underneath. So when you get into your highlights, I do suggest to use like an opaque, more of an opaque material. Throughout, even just adding these couple of colors in is bringing the portrait together. And that's why it is really important to make sure you are satisfied with that underpainting, because these glazes are only meant to enhance the underpainting and not be its final product. And I suggest, as you are going through your beginning stages of your underpainting, to start working in on your background, just so that your eyes can see how the colors interacted. And eventually, when I start doing the background, you can see that I start with this light blue color, which I end up liking and obviously adding to the rest of the portrait. But we did use some of that alizarin crimson and phthalo green mixture to make that purplish black that I do like to see. I just wanted to see how it would look, and I felt like it was too distracting. So I did fall in love with that baby blue background and wanted to continue it into the painting. Typically, for our backgrounds, old masters will not use glazes for a background because the glazes, the portrait will through the glazing, and if you use more of a flat color in the background, then typically it would just be opaque earth tones. So those burnt siennas, some of those greens that are very close to the earth tones, it really pushes it pushes the background back and makes the portrait itself pop out forward. And so I would suggest just to use opaque colors for the background, just so that you can see the difference between glazes versus just placing paint itself on a portrait, and you could see the difference. But yeah, so right now I am doing that alizarin crimson and phthalo green mixture. I ended up not liking it, and towards the end of the painting, I just decided to extend that blue to the rest of the portrait. And some people may not like this just because it makes the portrait itself look like a sticker on top of a flat background. But for some reason, I do enjoy that illusion. I do enjoy like works like Kahinde, where he has a beautiful realistic portrait and a flat background or a background with patterns. So I do typically like that look. And obviously right now with the baby blue background and the portrait of Kai right now, I do believe it's like missing some elements to tie it together. Right now it's a good juxtaposition, but it does feel like it's a very bold juxtaposition. It's going to take some problem solving to figure out how I want to keep that flat background with also a portrait of the subject being more of a realistic piece. I do like to paint a lot of patterns, and in Kahinde's artworks he does have a lot of floral patterns in it, and I feel like that's what ties together the flatness of the background and the rendered piece itself. So we'll see how I end up doing it. And especially right now, we this is just the first layer that I'm placing down for Kai right now. So hopefully I do figure out how I would like to have it. So we are going in with more reds into the coat. So we want to make sure that I do have some of those reds in. I felt like it was getting too yellow. So I did add the reds mixture with the burnt umber and raw sienna as a transitionary color between the darker shadows and the lightest lights of Kai's body. So I decided to go with the blue at the back of the porch. I just found that I just see that blue very striking. Originally, I was just trying to think of complementary colors, and for some reason, for the life of me, I couldn't remember my complementary colors. So when I placed that blue, I was like, okay, maybe not the correct complementary color, but I do like the boldness of the blue. And I actually want to put this in our room, in our master bedroom. I have plans to make each room of our home into a color theme. So obviously our living room is the color theme is green. And I think that color is mine's and my husband's favorite color. And but I don't want to just have green throughout the house. And I do really want to use this baby blue as a staple color in our master bedroom. Tell my husband yet, he doesn't know it yet, but buy some bed sheets and curtains to match this little color in there. I obviously probably won't paint the whole room blue, but just to add a theme into each room, I think would be fun. So I think I'm going for this baby blue and gonna try to match some portraits with the blue color, some picture frames, some curtains, some bed sheets, so that we can have some type of theme going on. So over here, I'm trying to get into the detail work of Kai. I found myself yellowing the portrait too much, so I wanted to go back into the shadows to use that alizarin crimson and phthalo green, and burnt umber to make it more brown. And I do leave some of the gray pushing through the portrait, especially in the area where his back is at. He tends to have little gray hairs in between the in underneath his fur. So I wanted to try to see if leaving the grays would actually allow that to push forward more. Coming back in with that opaque lighter color, felt like I could have pushed more with that, so I wanted to get those highlights out and just have them consistent throughout the piece. I'm trying to do detail work, but honestly, this is just the first layer, so I may go over it again 2 more times most likely. This is just a study because I do plan on doing a giant portrait with 2 separate giant portraits, one with me and Kai and one of our chicken girls, and I want to do another portrait Dizzy. And I think it would just be so funny to just have these giant portraits in the house, especially in our master bedroom. I think it would just be a little bit silly. So this study itself is actually the pose I'm gonna have Kai be in while he poses with me. So I think it'd be funny. So this is basically where I stopped in the process. At this point, I felt like it was glazing. I was using a lot of glazing, and the glazes started to mix together. I wanted to stay away from doing that. I wanted to try the dry on dry technique to just slowly build up the colors and not let the painting get muddy. So this is the finished product for today. I'm going to take a pause and let the glazing dry so I don't do a wet on wet technique and have the colors mixed together. But you can see Kai against this bold blue background. And I love how the underpainting just really shines through. Do 2 or 3 more glazes, see if I can really push the form. There are some areas where I think it could have a better transition between colors, and I would like to try to see how I can tie in this bold flat background with rendered subject itself to see how we can tie it together. I'm thinking maybe some patterns or maybe a darker blue pattern would do the trick, but we'll see. We'll probably spend 2 more glazes on this piece and then call it a day for this study. So that's it for the first glazing process of my boy Kai. Like I said earlier, this is just a study to see how well the underpainting looks with the glazing technique on top. And I may use this technique itself for these bigger portraits of me with Kai and our chicken girl, husband with Dizzy, our other dog. And I might be a big project and I would like to do a big portrait, so it might take a long time, but I'm planning to record the process, so stay tuned for that. I will write a Substack post going deeper into the glazing process. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed the process of seeing the first glazing layer of Kai.